Hey everyone, it's Denise. And if you want to book a reading, you can go to Denise Siegel booking. Just Google that or hit the more button below. Um, and you can book a reading that way. It has my schedule and everything on there. So today I want to do a little talk about the economy and some of the things that I see in the stock market chart and the US Constitution chart, which kind of tell us a little bit about the economy. And I want to show you some things that are indicative of. So every market crash is going to have a slightly different signature. Um, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But there are certain similarities. There's an axis in the stock market chart that really seems to be very sensitive. And I think kind of makes the market go up and down. In terms of bigger scale, massive disaster type market crashes that impact the economy, um, that has a slightly different sort of signature, and I'll show you some of that right now. And we're going to talk about that because we have some interesting things going on, is what I'll say, that I'm concerned about as we move forward into this new period in the fall, and as we're seeing these some of these policies kind of coming to fruition, and how they're going to impact things. So right now, today, that's where I'm at. It's early in the day, but you can see that Uranus went over the sun. It's going to go ahead and come back and hit the sun again by the end of this year. So this is the final hit of Uranus going over the sun of the stock market. I think it will, I don't know if it'll get back to that 27-degree mark, but it's certainly close enough. I maximally pulled this up. Just go back. Yeah. So it does actually go back by January of next year, and it's going to be exact again. And what I have seen from transits, that basically the last hit of a transit is usually the most impactful. It's one of those things where the universe kind of gives you a little tap, then it gives you a punch, then it hits you across the head with a baseball bat. That is often things come in threes, and transits have a tendency to move forward and then go backwards about average 3 times. Sometimes it happens twice, sometimes it happens 4 times. On very, very, very rare occasions, it happens 1 time. But most of the time, we're talking about threes. And this final Uranus conjunction to the sun implies a whole new sort of traumatized market, and one in which the values have changed, the work has changed, the perception has changed in the 10th house, and we have kind of a new paradigm coming out of it, right? And if you notice, if we go backwards to the start, actually, I should go back to this period because it's about when it happened in 2025. You can see that Uranus was on the Mercury, so people are like, whoa, what's going to happen next? And we had the tariff talk and all that. And then, dang it, I keep hitting the kooky stuff. And so that is really annoying me, how it keeps jumping to minutes. And so by the time you get to this, by the spring, when the markets sort of start freaking out again, you have Uranus on the sun. People don't know what to expect. They're not sure how the tariffs are going to affect things. There's a freak out. Mars is on the Uranus. And I don't remember the exact dates, but I'm just telling you general periods where this is happening. And you can see that Jupiter has moved into opposition with Mercury and the sun. So, and it's squaring Pluto, and it's squaring the progressed Uranus. So you have what's called a grand square happening. Grand squares are difficult. they're not impossible, but they certainly imply you have to a lot of workarounds. You have to work really hard to get over whatever it is. And we're in this big transition process here, with Uranus going over the sun. So it started this period. It's moved back and forth, and we've had this up and down kind of swinging back and forth. The whole, you know, taco thing, which is like, is Trump really going to do the tariffs? Is he not going to do the tariffs? The market kind of adjusts to whichever way it seems to go, and that's the erratic Uranian nature of what's been happening. But and you've got this opposition happening, which is not great. That's another very erratic placement, and Pluto is the natural ruler of the eighth house. The eighth house is the natural ruler of the stock market, because the eighth house is other people's money, it's investments, it's banks. And when you're in the stock market, obviously you're investing in corporations which use your money to make money or to infuse them with capital so they can grow their businesses. It's an eighth house deal. There's a fifth house element, meaning there's risk and sort of a little bit of a gambling kind of thing associated with it. So Jupiter would be a co-ruler, but here's the deal. In this chart, Jupiter co-rules the eighth house along with Neptune. And here they are conjunct. So you've got, here they are conjunct. You've got Jupiter and Neptune conjunct in the third house. So they are conjoined in the stock market in terms of this. Jupiter rules this fifth house gambling. It also rules the eighth house of other people's money and investments. And Neptune also rules this. So whenever you have anything, and of course there's a Saturn opposition to it, natally. So whenever you have anything hit this, the Saturn is triggered, and you get this constriction or this volatility. Usually there's a drop in the market. And I noticed this axis because I've looked at tons, and I mean, this was a long, long time ago that I did this. This was back in the early 2000s, right before the stock market crashed in 2008, where I started my blog and put out the warning, there's going to be a massive stock market crash. And it was like maybe 6 to 8 weeks before it happened. Nobody saw it because there were so many blogs and it was totally hidden. And then all of a sudden I predicted this thing, and then somebody gamed the system so that I get all of these hits on my page. And that's how my blog started and became very popular. It had hundreds of thousands of hits every, I don't even remember, but it was a lot of traffic that I started getting. And so I've been forecasting this kind of stuff for a long, long time. And also, forecasting who was going to win what election and what was going to happen, just mundane kind of things happening in the world, right? I predicted COVID-19, not as necessarily a pandemic, but I predicted that in reference to somebody asking a question about the nifty stock market. And looking ahead, I saw there was this confluence of planets in Capricorn with the node. And I said, there's going to be some kind of natural disaster that's going to disrupt the world economy and people's work and people's careers. And of course, 2019, I said that the time frame would be 2019 to 2020. And of course, that did happen. Hold on a second. Shoot. Hold on. Darn it. Sorry about that little interruption. So I had identified that period. What? That's not what happened to my. Oh yeah. Okay, it's Mercury retrograde right now. So I had identified 2019, the end of 2019 to the beginning of 2020, as the period when this thing would happen. And honestly, I completely forgot about it. Until someone pointed out to me that I had said this back in 2008 or 2000. Yeah, it was early on in the blog because somebody asked me what was going to happen with that. So it was like 10 years or whatever before. I forgot about it. But anyway, so I've been looking at this stuff for a very long time. And And this is a pattern. And how I identified it was, if you've ever noticed, stocks seem to always get depressed for whatever reason. I'm sure there's some stock reason in terms of like some logical reason. Maybe the third quarter report comes out or something, or the fourth quarter. I don't freaking know. But there's always sort of a depression or like a dip in the fall. And the two major stock market crashes are 2008 and the one that started out the depression, both happened in the fall. And there were things happening at this degree between 22 and 27 degrees, 26 degrees right here. So that's about the midpoint. There was always something right around here in Libra, right? Which would make sense. I mean, this is being activated. And there always seemed to be like a natural dip whenever there was something crossing that axis. And that is a traditional kind of thing. That's why, in my opinion, the fall always has some kind of dip. There's a bunch of planets that go across this, and this kind of freaks the market out a little bit. Now, this is a very different set of aspects. And so it's something that, and we're going to look at the Great Depression for a second right now. So you can see what I'm talking about, that the Great Depression, it shows up not just in the New York Stock Exchange chart, but really it shows up in the US Constitution signing chart. And it shows up in a way that is almost mind-boggling. It's so accurate and bizarre. So I'm going to show it to you here in the New York Stock Exchange chart. And we're going to go ahead and use the progressions and things like that. So I'm going to put it in. It was October 29th, 1929. And we'll just put it at noon because that's fine. Okay, so on this day, the moon had moved into Libra, was on the node. Uranus is also on the node opposing. So we don't really have a bunch of stuff on this axis, except for progressions, right? We have the sun, Venus, Neptune, and the Venus is on this progression right here. It's getting to this midpoint here. And natally, of course, the Venus is over here in Taurus. So it has moved all the way across here over many, many years. Stock market started in 1792. And this is many years later. And Venus has migrated and the sun has migrated to being in Libra, where ultimately they ended up crossing that threshold. And of course, Venus during this period was on that Jupiter Neptune midpoint, not exactly, but close enough. Uranus had moved into this position of opposition with Pluto. So this has been going on for a very long time. Those planets and progressions go very slow. And it was squaring Mercury. But we didn't have an opposition here. We didn't have anything creating a big old square. We just had a T-square. We didn't have a grand square. So if you notice here, Neptune is poised, and this is really the tell. So Neptune's in Virgo right here. And this is what I was going to show you. It's kind of mind-boggling. But as you see, Neptune, this is January 1990. See, that's messed up. Okay, so it's supposed to be October. Sorry about that. So here we go. So Neptune is poised to hit this placement. And so this is even closer to the midpoint here when this happens. So you've got Neptune poised to go over the second house. And as you will see, Neptune starts to transit that house within a month. And it stays in the second house of jobs and money until 1945, when we enter the war. Here it is. Now I think it's, yeah. So here it kind of starts to get out of the second house and go into the third house. I'm trying to remember. I think, let me look at this chart too. I was thinking it was actually, yeah, that's right. So you have this kind of New York Stock Exchange, you see this kind of very clear Neptune transit of the second house, which would be the loss of jobs. It's so very literal. Um, October 29, 1929. By the end of that day, look how close it is. It's right conjunct the second house cusp, just about to go over. So this is a loss, and everybody. And it's interesting because I feel like was so you have it within a month. It's going through. And am I wrong about that date? Maybe it's November 29th, 1929, that it was crashing. I'm gonna look really quick. Maybe it's Mercury retrograde right now. All I can say is it's very Mercury retrograde for me. Um, okay, 1929 stock market crash. Uh, oh, I saw it and then I didn't see it. Okay. And of course, it's like everything but what I'm looking for. October. Yeah, it was October 29th. Okay. So within a month, you've got Neptune going through this house, and even probably really within a few, it even starts actually before a month. So it's like the beginning of November, like mid-November, it goes over the second house. You get all these job losses as a result of the stock market crash. And it stays into in that placement. Is it 1942? Maybe it's that period actually. Yeah. 1941. Did we join in? Okay. So it looks like it actually moves out of the second house by the end of 1941. So that is pretty much the entire period of the Depression. And I think when we do if I throw up Pearl Harbor here, we can just superimpose that because that's the beginning of us joining the war effort. And I'll just superimpose that. I'll show you the bi-wheel here. So New York Stock Exchange, Pearl Harbor. There it is. See, literally happens almost like to the month. It's so very close. It just moves into the threshold of the third house. And you've got the note on Mars here too. So this entire period of the 30s, starting at the end of 1929, going all the way to 1941. So it was 1941 when Neptune moves into the third house. It's uncanny, really, that it's so timed out like that. And so you also see Uranus is right on the sun too. So this is a change in the economy. Now, Uranus is neutral. And I just want to make this point that Uranus probably played a massive role in how the economy changed as well, because Uranus is change for the sake of change. Whether it's good or bad, it's a neutral planet. It means that if things are going one way, if you're happy, 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 and everything is going your way, and you have a Uranus transit, bang, you're hit, and you're going a different direction. And things kind of generally, it's not a fun thing to have a Uranus transit when everything in your life is in order, because it means massive change and it's going to happen really dramatically. And it's generally, if you're happy and everything changes, you're not so happy after that. The opposite is true. If you're having a really hard time and things are difficult, Uranus transit is a welcome relief. It's a change. All of a sudden, things change radically. And if you're in a downslope or a down period, a Uranus transit is a welcome thing. Like finally, something is changing radically, and I can, things are going to shift. So you have Uranus on the sun. Ironically, the same thing that we see now with Uranus on the sun by the beginning of next year, right? It's the same placement. It's going to be right on the sun. And we've had a great economy. And now we've had these Uranus transits, and bang, we're having problems now. So it goes both ways. It swings both ways. It's just a change, a massive change, for better or worse. Uranus doesn't care. It just wants to change the energy, wants to move things around. It wants to change everything. Now, in this case, too, the sun is trining Uranus. You've got Mars on the moon. You've got a lot of fire energy, and there's a grand fire trine happening. So it changed things in a new direction. War, Mars and Aries, Sun and Sag, trining Uranus. It went to a war economy, and it took us out of the depression. So let's look at the New York Stock Exchange during the 2008 crisis, when that really hit. That was September 29th instead of October, which is ironic as well. Another 29. How weird is that, right? 2008, when our whole economic system started to collapse and the government had to step in and do something about it, or the whole economy, everything, the whole world economy was going to just be taken down with the mishigas of the elite class of people who decided to do derivatives of housing. So their butts got saved. And look at that. The moon in South Node, Uranus is right on that. And that was a housing crisis thing. That was because they'd been playing around in the eighth house of other people's money, giving people loans and doing all this crazy fandangled stuff to basically steal from the little guy, give it to the wealthy, through housing derivatives. I don't understand all of that crap. I don't even want to know, to be honest. And then Saturn's on Mars and the node here. So we have this nodal thing, a karmic thing. Uranus comes and goes, bank. Nope, not happening anymore. Pluto is on the sun. So there's a big shift, a big change, transformation, things come out. We realize, there's been all this gambling with everyone's money. But notice Mars right here, right on the opposition. Time to pay the piper. Mars on the Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn. So all of a sudden, we've got all these different aspects happening. You still have this Uranus-Pluto opposition there too. See, this is a long-term thing. And you've got this T-square. Jupiter is starting to get into position, in opposition, and making a grand square. The government, Saturn, kind of saved, and Pluto remade the markets, saved the situation. You've got Neptune on the Pluto. So this is the banking crisis that could have unfolded, but Uranus, Pluto, but the government bailed out the banking system. And you can see there is a T square happening here. There's a big grand square happening. This is pretty directly, obviously, about, and had a lot to do with, the housing bubble, the housing market. And this is also, of course, squaring the progressed sun with Pluto on it. There's a lot going on. But, and then you've got the nodes in the seventh and first houses. So this is sort of, it happened that day. These are long kind of arcing aspects. This, is more, this is more transitory because the moon moves relatively quick, even in progressed charts. It's some quick moving compared to anything else, actually. And then Uranus on it, making an in conjunction to this Uranus and squaring the sun. So and then Mars that day, and Mercury and moon and the sun, the new moon, and Mars was just going bang. It's all coming out. It's going to happen today. And you had that trigger point. So nowadays, now where we are at, and this is what I was looking at COVID about, was just that Capricorn energy. But let's look at current time, right? August. And we've just had this, now we have this reverse nodal conjunction, which is never great, and it's right on the Mars. So that's also bad for the market. This is problems with jobs, and the jobs report being bad is because there is probably a slowdown in that for real. It's not just a whatever trumped up situation. It's not that. It's real. It's a real problem. And you've got the progressed sun in Capricorn here in conjuncting Uranus and squaring the moon, the natal moon. And I would say this is probably, we're not even dealing with the fact that AI is, and so the final pass of this Uranus on the sun is probably when we're going to really see the real change in the market, where the market becomes kind of like it was before when we had that Uranus transit to the sun in 1941, coming out of the Depression. A new market was born. We were basically went from being an economy of one kind to an economy that was based in a war economy. And so this Uranus transit implies there is some kind of change in our economy that is big and is going to be setting a pace for a period of time. So this is, in the case of 1945, the war economy lasted for about 15 years, or it went well into the 50s, right? Where, it had its effects for a long time, for about a decade. And in this case, I would assume that this is also the beginning of a change in the economy that is going to be long lasting. It's not just like the 2008 thing that's going to be solved with a simple, bailout and taxpayer bailout. This is something bigger. It's a change in the identity of the market. It's a change in how the market functions. And it's a major shift. And as you notice, Jupiter now, right, Neptune here, has moved into the fourth house. It's finally crossed over, and pretty recently, into the fourth. And that's not great. It's opposing Venus, which is another ruler of money. And you've got Jupiter in real tight, you've got this in this midpoint here between Uranus, Pluto, Venus, Jupiter. So if you take the biggest number, 27, and you take 23, 25 is right in the midpoint. And you've got this big, nasty grand square. So this is a big kind of cluster F for the economy, right? And for the market. And you've got Saturn having kind of been going through this 8th house. And it's kind of coming back into the 8th house. It will have just moved out into Aries, and then it's kind of setting back into the 8th. And you've got the node still in the 8th house. Now, I would think this fall is generally the time frame where we have something cross the threshold here. And you can see Mars will be right on this, the progressed moon, Jupiter, Neptune here, coming up this fall. So September is when it crosses, and Mars is a malefic. And then you've got Venus here right on the Uranus. So lighting up that grand square around the 13th, you've got this Mars opposition. You've got Venus on Uranus opposing Pluto, making this grand square very tight. And something is coming here. Now, as it gets tighter on that Neptune placement, so this is a period probably in September, mid-September to, until we get out of that conjunction. So probably until the 3rd week. So the 2nd to the 3rd week of September, we have this trigger point. And then, of course, then there's other things that start moving over that configuration. And this is worrisome because this Neptune opposition could be implying something bigger coming down the road, and some kind of loss of jobs, money, And I've written on Substack before, we're talking about a new paradigm, a paradigm shift, and you can see it here. It's somehow starting at the beginning of next year. I don't necessarily think AI is going to be replacing everyone's jobs that quickly, but I think there's probably something coming that is going to be displacing and problematic, even as early as we get into the beginning of next year, some kind of paradigm shift. And what that is, well, we'll see, but it is some kind of paradigm shift. By the beginning of next year, the market is different and the way it functions is different. And if you are smart and you know how the market's going to change, I suppose you could make a lot of money. If you are somebody like a normal person who just has money, in a 401k and doesn't really know much about it, you're going to have to be careful because this is a big change. And unless you do some research now and figure out what this could possibly be, and this might be AI because Uranus and Taurus, as I said back, I don't know, when did I start going on? 2018 or something. So 7 years ago, when Uranus went into Taurus, there'd be some kind of automation of work. There'd be some kind of disruption, technological disruption in how we work and how we do our work. And AI was born during the period of time of Uranus and Taurus. And it's going to be supercharged when it goes into Gemini because Gemini rules computers. And we're going to see it take off. And so this Uranus and Taurus new paradigm might have something to do with people's work being displaced, AI, besides whatever other mishigas is happening, politically and in the world and wars and whatever crazy stuff is coming our direction and bird flu and all that stuff, which is, I think, culminating a little later, but this is a paradigm shift. And so regular people have to be kind of prepared and really do your research. If you're going to invest in the market, you really have to know a lot about the market. And I feel like the market is kind of a game for really wealthy people. People who can get insider information and know what's coming down the pike. The rest of us schlubs, we don't really know what's happening. We don't have eyes on it. It's hidden, eighth house. And people in power, eighth house, they get to see behind the curtain and they can make money when other people can't. So this is something to consider. And this Uranus is going to be on there from January, February, March. It's going to be, those 3 months are some kind of turning point, some kind of massive change. And that's the final hit of that placement until it goes back into Gemini. And so we'll see an escalation in AI, maybe even the beginning of some kind of, this may be when, that sentience thing or whatever, maybe when it crosses into the 11th house a little bit later, when it starts to really kind of shoot off and become a whole other thing. So sometime when Uranus and Gemini, I expect it to kind of really ramp up and it become, perhaps this Uranus and Taurus hit will be when people start to realize an industry and that this is the way of the future and this is going to displace people's jobs and people start to reorganize their money and what they invest in. I don't know what it is exactly. All I know is there's this big change coming and it's going to be difficult. And if you are not somebody who is a wealthy power broker, you might have problems. So be careful. The other thing I want to mention is that the North Node is in Pisces right now. And it is going to continue getting deeper into Pisces and go into Aquarius and then go into Capricorn. So we are on a downturn, natural downturn for the real estate market. So as the nodes go into Capricorn, the North Node goes into Capricorn, there has historically been a cycle. I read about it years ago in the early 90s, some book I read that I could never find again. But it was quite interesting and the data was very solid and I have watched it ever since. And it is true that the North Node, which is the node of the moon, seems to control the flow and sort of what people's feelings are about real estate. And whenever the North Node goes into Capricorn, there is a downturn and people freak out and don't want to buy property. They just don't. They're afraid to own anything. They're afraid. They just want to either, they want to rent, or they don't know where they want to live, or they're not sure what they're doing. And you could see where this would make sense now. Back in the 2008 period, I think, let's look at the nodes where they were then. I think they might have been in Pisces then. No, they were in Aquarius. So you see it's already into Aquarius. So usually it's around that period when it moves into Aquarius that it gets real bad. And then it kind of moves into Capricorn. And that's when it's at its really low point and takes a period to climb out of that. So you have the beginning of a slowdown usually in Pisces, then you have it getting kind of like problematic in Aquarius, and then it can crash in Aquarius because it's close enough to that North Node in Capricorn. And then in Capricorn, it bottoms out in terms of prices. So in Aquarius, it's sort of like people may still be having their house up for sale for $800,000, and really it doesn't sell, it doesn't move, nobody buys it because it's conflated, overinflated. And then by the time it gets into Capricorn, it's reevaluated and people realize, it's really not worth $800,000 in this market, it's worth $500,000 now. And then the prices start to really go down and start to really kind of tank. And you get to this place where they bottom out, and then it moves out of Capricorn into Sagittarius, and you start to get a little bit of movement again. And then you get out of Sagittarius into Scorpio, and it starts to kind of build back up. So it takes a few years in both directions for it to kind of go to this dip. But we're headed in that direction as we move into the Aquarius placement. And right now it's in Pisces, so we're starting to see a little bit of stagnating of the market, especially in certain areas, and it will be by region how extreme this is and how intense, depending on if your market is, glutted with houses or the people are moving in or out. I mean, so there is a very regional thing about this, which is why, as it moves into Pisces, there's usually some kind of beginnings, signs of problems. And as it moves into Aquarius, it really starts to heat up. And by Capricorn, it's like, oh my gosh, you can buy a house for half what you could have bought it for, what it was worth maybe 6 years ago or 5 years ago. I mean, that's what happens. So you really want to make sure to buy low, right, when it's in Capricorn, and not sell during that period, and sell when it's the North Node's in Cancer, which is when it's at the top of the market. And again, that's the same thing. There's a slope, there's a steady slope, and then it goes into Cancer and it stays up, and it kind of stays up for a while until it starts to come back down. So depending on how healthy the market is, depending how healthy the economy is, the slope can be really quite long, and meaning like as it moves into Cancer, it can be, a really good market for a while. So let me see, when did that happen last? So it was in Capricorn, moves into, so we're here into, 2015, it's getting better. It's moving into, that's in Leo right there. So this is when the market's starting to get real good and strong. And see, it was in Cancer, I think, or is in Gemini. It was backwards. It's confusing. From Leo. So it was in Cancer in 2019 and into 2020. So that whole thing with the pandemic, it was actually kind of, we had North Node in Cancer during the pandemic. So that was kind of a weird, like, how is that happening, right? And then it started to kind of settle down by the, like, but so the height of this sort of price point would have been really kind of peaking around, like, as we go moving right before the pandemic into the pandemic. So that's kind of confusing. And that, I think, was one of those things where prices went up, people were trying to move to like rural areas, and it didn't really seem to make sense. Like you're supposed to be staying in your home, but yet it did. Everybody wanted to have their own house, their own little nest to hang out in, and that's the North Node of Cancer. And so then you have it going into Gemini, right? It's still high and still continues to go high, 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 high. And until it gets into and it sort of stabilizes here for a long time. It's in Taurus. It's fine. It really doesn't, it sort of stabilizes and it kind of builds. It should stay kind of stable for a while until it moves into those signs, like I'm telling you, where it starts to get into Pisces. And then it starts to go, and then people are like, I don't know, I really want to buy a house. So I really, there's problems I can see brewing. And this is when you start to see a decline, is when it moves into Pisces. And it's not like a massive decline. It's usually just like people don't want to buy houses as much. Things kind of get stale. And that's what we're seeing right now, right? We're seeing this sort of things are sitting for longer. And this is the beginning of 2025. People don't know where they want to live and all this stuff. And so this is the beginning of Pisces. So this is not the bottom of the market, but it is a little harder to sell your house right now. And as we go continuing down the nodal rabbit hole, you can see that it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better for a while. It will eventually bottom out and come back up. But we're talking about it being in Capricorn and then moving. So it's going to really not be until a little later. And again, depending on how healthy the economy is, what's going on, other things, that will also determine how quickly it rebounds or how far it rebounds. But it will have this natural flow like that. And it's relatively gentle. And as long as you like living where you live and you buy your house in a time frame, I mean, it's a gentle flow like this, I should say, because it still always kind of goes up. As long as you don't buy at the top of the market and decide to sell at the bottom, you're pretty much fine with real estate. So that's just the other piece I wanted to show you. Now here's something I wanted to point out is that here is the US Constitution signing chart. And so if you notice this, Neptune's been going through the second house. So that's the job house, job and work and money. And Neptune going through the house here and Saturn is restriction and people having more problems financially. The regular people, workers, average people, it would have started back, I think, last year, and people blamed it on Biden, but this is sort of, again, a natural kind of cycle. And there's certain things that could be done, but there's only so much. And you can see that it really started kind of happening. And we didn't really, the price of eggs and all that, we had this opposition to the sun. This was exactly opposite here by March of 2023. Inflation and all those things were starting to kind of happen, and they were really nothing much you could do about some of them, like because it was bird flu and other things like that. But now we're pretty deep into it, and we've got this Saturn Neptune conjunction in a second. That's the leaderlessness and the wars, and this is impacting people's work and their jobs and their ability to make money, and this is inflation and loss of income. And if you remember that in the Great Depression, Neptune was going through the second house of job loss in the stock market chart. Well, it's going through the second house of job loss in the US Constitution signing chart. That was a global phenomenon. This is a US phenomenon. And we're going to get to an opposition with the natal Neptune in the 8th house, which is not a great thing coming up. And I think this is when we're talking about, as everything else crazy is happening. We've had this Uranus transit opposing the moon, all that stuff. And now we have this Neptune thing. This, I've been looking at that, and also the fact that this Neptune placement in Aries, eventually the stock market also has, because remember, this Neptune-Jupiter conjunction here, when we have the Neptune in opposition to the Neptune in the U.S. Constitution signing chart, which is at 17 degrees in the 8th house, it will be on Jupiter right here. It won't be exact, but it'll be opposing the moon. So trouble in the homeland, and it's affecting people's mood, feelings, and they're lost and confused. And then it starts to hit the Jupiter and the Neptune, and that's the 8th house of money. And we have this we've had this Neptune transit here. So and also so the transit's actually going to be happening up here. I'll show you. So we've had Neptune going through this 8th house, where there's been probably stuff going on that we haven't seen that's going to be contributing to this period of war and strife. And we've got this nodal thing. So this was actually this is a stock market change. So this is some kind of like this can imply potentially the 9th house is overseas wars, the Saturn Neptune, and eventually as it hits this moon and opposes this Jupiter, it's around the same time as it hits as we have the Neptune opposition in the Constitution signing chart of the 8th house. It's right around here. So remember that that's right kind of at the midpoint between the 17 degrees in the US Constitution chart, and this is the New York Stock Exchange chart. Something very big is happening here. And this could mean the 8th house and the 2nd house in the Constitution signing chart is potential loss of work and jobs and money and resources. And this chart, it kind of implies, people potentially losing money, in the market, loss of capital. It could also be foreign wars that don't help the economy, that actually make the economy worse and make it people losing their resources. And I think the thing about this, what this speaks to me about is, you have these tech people running like crazy to, make things and, make new technologies and break things as they go. And what they don't seem to understand is that AI, which by this point would be fully, I think, operational and be, Uranus would have moved out of Gemini by then and be the 11th house. This would already be a big part of the culture by 2033. That not only will it impact people like me and you and the average worker as the Neptune transit goes through the 2nd house of the US Constitution signing chart and opposes the Neptune placement in the 8th, but it will also impact the people that are investors and the people that have money in the market and the wealthy class. Because think about this. As corporations start to collapse and they need less and less workers and people can't afford to buy things, that's going to shrink the economy massively. And this could be a new paradigm, a paradigm shift in terms of starting now with that Uranus conjunction to the sun, but really feeling the effects of the loss and how this new paradigm will eventually collapse capitalism, the capitalism, the system of the New York Stock. This is a very fucked up aspect. Excuse my language. This is a biggie. This is a Neptune opposition to Jupiter, with Jupiter conjuncting it and Neptune opposing the Neptune. This means there's massive, massive losses. And foreign investment, 9th house. This could be the real collapse of the economy as we know it. And that sounds really far away. 2034, that's 9 years from now, 9 years from now. And that sounds like, okay, well, we have time for that. But this is paradigm changing, I think. This is not just, this is like, this is kind of like the Great Depression, but on a different scale. It's not just poor working people. This is everybody. This is the wealthy. This is the regular people. This is the whole thing. It's on the Saturn, the system itself going bye-bye, collapsing, goodbye-bye. Nothing's working anymore. We have to rethink this whole deal. And that's what, we're talking 11 years from now. That's not very long. That's kind of a scary thought. And then, we're going to have to figure something out, because it's just, I think this Neptune transit is like a whole new ballgame. As Neptune goes into Taurus, how are we going to sustain ourselves? What is our basic value if we don't have work and people can't, if everybody loses everything? And I think this would imply not just, this is like a system collapse type of transit. So it's not just, workers being out of work like it was during the Great Depression. I mean, it by all rights, Neptune going through the 8th house should have meant the loss of equity and money and capital. Yet it did not happen. So that trickery and that manipulating of markets and the rich kind of finding ways to kind of game the system so they could make money and powerful and look over here, well, we do this over here. That's how it ended up manifesting. But it's not going to be able to stay in that place of trickery forever. We're going to have this collapsing aspect coming up. And it's a house of cards that's going to need a rewrite. We're going to need to figure out, how do we go forward if capitalism dies? How do people sustain themselves? And that's not just for the average person. This is going to hit people who are billionaires and millionaires. It's going to collapse the whole thing. So, and we'll have just gone through this very crazy period of Uranus going through the 4th house, where we've just started to see it this year, and we've seen how much change has happened on the homeland and how much violence has already occurred. This is going to get worse, and it's going to get a lot worse starting next year, when I'll show you what happens next year. Come on, if I can make this stupid cursor work. I think it's July of 2026. Uranus and Mars are opposing the moon. You've got Pluto starting to conjunct the 1st house cusp, and opposing Mars. This is a very volatile period, and something incendiary is going to happen during this period. And this period is the start, I think, of some kind of hot civil war. I think this is the period where it gets hotter and more violent. And then you've got a full year later, as Uranus is exactly opposing the moon. And this is really the executive branch being very under a lot of fire. And you've got Pluto starting to get tighter on this opposition on the angles. And then you have Pluto over the ascendant by 2028. And you've got Uranus opposing and Venus here. And you've got this whole dealio happen. And then Sun is going to go across into the 4th house. So this is like, things are really, the people, potentially AI, potentially the transformation of how we see ourselves. And also it could be the beginning of, like, a lot of things. But it could be technological, human related, could be even alien kind of information coming out. It could be a lot of things. Pluto, Aquarius rules a lot of that, all that stuff. We're in our Pluto return here, and it's opposing Mars. So there's some kind of fighting going on. The public, the powers that be, those who are privileged, Leo, and those who are the regular average people, the masses. in some kind of a war stance. And then you've got Uranus and Venus opposing the moon. So this is still happening. So this is just a constant sort of pushback and breaking apart of the homeland, chaos. And then you've also got Neptune going through the second house. So job loss, financial problems in the homeland. It's trining the moon by this point, and opposing the moon here. So I don't know what that means exactly. Maybe, maybe it might be the thing that's fueling people's anger and making them more likely to kind of rear up the financial losses and the problems, and people feeling like maybe we need a new type of system or leadership. And then you've got the South Node Uranus on the node here. And it continues in the fourth house for a while until you get to Pluto going over the ascendant with Mars. You've got Uranus on the node. Here is starting to culminate, and we're starting to get into a very, just getting more and more volatile. And then Saturn on the sun and Uranus continue going back and forth. So this is a long arcing process before we get to that Neptune opposition. So there's a lot going to happen, a lot that's going to happen that's going to be kind of intense. Before now, here the sun moves into the fourth, and this Neptune opposition is happening. So this is like, and you've got the Pluto Mars thing. You've got a lot going on. Uranus is now moved into the fifth. It's still in Gemini. It's on the Jupiter. This is like big changes coming. Big changes coming, and our sense of who we are and what our homeland is going to be, who we are as a people, and what's coming for the country. And this kind of implies in Gemini opposing the moon that the union might not stay together. There might be a splitting off or a dualism that kind of emerges, that maybe the country doesn't stay together. Maybe there's a fracturing happening here, and either there's a fight to keep it together, or maybe there's just eventually allowing the country to fracture, and there being two states or multiple states, or maybe some kind of AI related thing, computer related thing, or perhaps it's sort of a rethinking of what our Constitution is and how do we remake it as Pluto gets closer to the Saturn. Uranus is in Gemini. Maybe we need to rethink our system and rebuild it. Could be all of the above or some variation of. So we're talking about some very unusual period coming up here. And the economy is one driver of this. I've been looking at bird flu as well. Bird flu looks like there's another potential. This is another thing that's coming and will impact, and I'll deal with that in another video. And I'll continue to look at that. So it's a lot to think about. I'm going to leave you with that, and I hope you have a wonderful, try to just take deep breaths, do your spiritual work. That's really important. That's the most important thing you can do right now is your spiritual work. Know there's a lot of changes coming. Try to prepare yourself as best you can to go with the flow, and to kind of watch where you put your money, watch these different things as they unfold, to make sure you're not in harm's way. And that's about it, just kind of doing your spiritual work will help you with all your intuitive abilities, being able to navigate this very unusual period. All right, blessings to all of you. On the 15th, I'm going to do a meditation because that's the day Baba Vanga talked about being in a positive state of mind and it impacting the future. So we're going to do something here, and I will hope to see you there. You'll see me before that. And blessings to all of you. Have a good one. If you haven't subscribed to my Substack, please do, because the deeper things are there. And this, I'm going to be dealing with things that are not that are kind of more generic. So if you want to go deeper, want to get more information about stuff, go to my Substack. Please subscribe. You don't have to pay. You can just do a free subscription. And if you want to book a reading, you know where to find me. Just hit the more button or Google me, Denise Siegel Booking, and you'll find my Square site where you can book it. Okay. Blessings to all of you. Have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful week. Take care.